Blood trickled down Marcus Johnson's lip as the airport security pinned him against the wall. 3 officers' knees digging into his back while his terrified children screamed nearby. All because he refused to move his family from their first-class seats when flight attendant Karen Winters insisted they didn't belong there. The airline CEO watching this unfold from across the terminal wasn't just any bystander. He was Marcus's brother-in-law. What nobody realized, the Johnson family didn't just have tickets for those seats. They owned the entire airline. Could this horrific display of discrimination destroy everything they had built? Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in standing up against injustice and discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe for more eye-opening true stories that expose the reality many face every day. The Johnson family had been planning this Disney World vacation for months. Marcus Johnson, a brilliant aeronautics engineer with 3 patents to his name, had promised his kids this trip after both excelled in their school's science fair. His wife Diana, a powerhouse corporate attorney specializing in discrimination cases, had finally cleared her schedule after winning a landmark case. Their children, 12-year-old Zoe with her father's analytical mind and 8-year-old Eli with his mother's fierce determination, had been counting down the days with handmade paper chains decorating their bedrooms. What made this trip special wasn't just the destination. The Johnsons would be flying first class on Skyway Airlines, the very company that Marcus and Diana's brother James Richardson owned together. James served as CEO, while the Johnsons maintained silent ownership, preferring to live normal lives without the spotlight that came with being airline magnates. They rarely flaunted their connection, believing their children should understand the value of hard work rather than privilege. "Did you pack your Mickey ears?" Marcus asked Eli as they loaded their luggage into their SUV that crisp Friday morning. Eli patted his backpack with a wide grin, revealing a missing front tooth. "Got 'em right here, Dad, and my autograph book." "Two." Diana finished a call with her office, tucking her phone away. "That's it. Officially on vacation mode now. No more cases, no more clients, just family time." Zoe looked up from her tablet where she had been studying the Disney park map. "Will Uncle James be joining us there?" "Not this time, sweetie," Diana replied. "He's stuck handling some board meetings, but he made sure we got the best seats on the plane." They arrived at Atlanta International Airport 3 hours before departure, Marcus always preferring to be early rather than rushed. The terminal bustled with summer travelers, families similar to theirs heading off on adventures. At the Skyway check-in counter, a young attendant named Taylor looked up their reservation, her eyebrows rising slightly as she saw their first-class tickets. "First class to Orlando for and 4, she asked, emphasizing the number while glancing at their casual attire. Marcus nodded. "That's correct." Taylor's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "And you're all together? Same last name?" "Yes," Diana interjected firmly. "Johnson, all 4 of us. Is there a problem?" No problem," Taylor responded quickly, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's just unusual to see. I mean, it's a full flight, and first class is usually..." She trailed off, realizing the implication of her words. Diana's lawyer instincts kicked in. "Usually what? Full of families like ours?" Taylor blushed. "I just need to verify these tickets again. One moment." While they waited, Marcus noticed other families, predominantly white, checking in for first class without additional verification. No raised eyebrows, no second checks. After an uncomfortable 5 minutes, Taylor finally handed over their boarding passes. "You're all set. Enjoy your flight." As they walked toward security, Diana whispered to Marcus, "Did that just happen?" "Let it go," he murmured back. "Let's not let anything spoil this trip." But the tension only increased when they reached the TSA checkpoint. Despite having TSA pre-check, the officer directed the Johnson family to the regular screening line. "But we have pre-check," Marcus pointed out, showing their boarding passes. The TSA officer barely glanced at them. "Random selection for additional screening. Please step to the regular line." Marcus observed as white families with pre-check sailed through the expedited lane without similar random selection. The so-called random process seemed anything but random. When they finally reached the scanner, Marcus and Diana were pulled aside for pat-downs while their children watched nervously. Their carry-ons received extra scrutiny, with officers rifling through carefully packed clothes and toiletries. "What are they looking for?" Eli whispered to his sister, eyes wide with confusion. Zoe, old enough to understand what was happening, squeezed his hand. "Nothing, Eli. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find." After 30 minutes of additional screening, during which they watched dozens of other passengers pass through without incident, they were finally cleared to proceed to their gate. "Dad," Zoe said quietly as they collected their belongings. "That wasn't random, was it?" Marcus met his daughter's eyes, seeing the dawning awareness there. He'd hoped to shield his children from these realities a little longer, but the world had other plans. "No, sweetheart," he admitted. "Probably not." Diana checked her watch. "We still have time to grab breakfast before boarding. Let's try to reset and focus on the fun ahead." They found a cafe near their gate and ordered pancakes for the kids. As they ate, Marcus couldn't help noticing the glances from nearby travelers. Subtle, double takes followed by whispers. The excitement of their family vacation was already being tainted by the familiar undercurrent of prejudice they'd faced countless times before. "Maybe we should have taken the private jet," Diana murmured, picking at her yogurt parfait. Marcus shook his head. "No, we're not hiding. The kids deserve a normal experience, and we deserve to fly on our own airline like anyone else." Little did they know, their determination to have a normal experience was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. Boarding Group 1 for Skyway Airlines Flight 372 to Orlando. First-class passengers and those needing special assistance may board at this time. The Johnson family gathered their belongings, Eli bouncing with excitement as they prepared to board. As co-owners of the airline, they could have arranged special treatment, but Marcus and Diana had always insisted on experiencing their company as regular customers would. It helped them improve services and understand the passenger experience firsthand. They approached the gate, boarding passes and IDs ready. The gate agent smiled professionally, scanned their tickets, and waved them through. For a moment, it seemed the earlier incidents had been isolated unpleasantness. That illusion shattered the moment they stepped onto the aircraft. Karen Winters, a flight attendant with artificially brightened blonde hair and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, intercepted them before they could reach their seats. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying down the aisle. "I believe you may have boarded during first-class call by mistake. Let me see your boarding passes." Marcus, maintaining his composure, handed over the passes. "No mistake, we're in 2A through 2D." Karen examined their passes with exaggerated scrutiny, flipping them over as if expecting to find counterfeit markings. Other first-class passengers were boarding now, squeezing past the Johnsons who remained standing in the aisle. "These seats are over $1,000 each," Karen remarked loudly, her voice carrying to nearby passengers who had begun to stare. "Are you certain you're in the correct cabin?" Diana stepped forward. "We're certain. Is there a problem?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "It's just unusual to see a family of 4 in first class. These seats are typically purchased by business travelers or—" She trailed off, implication hanging in the air. "Or what?" Diana pressed. "Or passengers who can afford them," Karen finished, scanning their casual vacation attire. Several passengers had taken out phones, recording the interaction. Zoe noticed and nudged her father, who subtly shook his head. They didn't need a scene. "We can afford them," Marcus stated calmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to get seated before we hold up the rest of the boarding process." Karen reluctantly stepped aside but didn't move far. She watched as they settled into their spacious first-class seats, whispering to another flight attendant while gesturing toward them. "Dad," Eli whispered, "why does that lady think we can't sit here?" Before Marcus could answer, Karen returned with another crew member, a tall man with a name tag reading Brett. "I apologize for the confusion," Brett said without sounding apologetic at all. "But there seems to be a seating discrepancy we need to verify. May I see your boarding passes again?" Diana handed them over, her patience wearing thin. We've already shown these twice. As more first-class passengers boarded, all eyes fell on the Johnson family. The humiliation was palpable as Brett and Karen huddled over their boarding passes, speaking in hushed tones while occasionally glancing their way. Have you ever experienced that sinking feeling when you know you're being judged solely based on how you look? Comment number 1. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere despite having every right to be there, hit subscribe. If you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of their appearance. An elderly white woman in seat 1B leaned over to Karen. Is there a problem? I paid a premium for a peaceful flight, and I don't appreciate disturbances. Karen nodded sympathetically. We're handling it, ma'am. Rest assured. What exactly are you handling? Diana asked, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. We have valid tickets for these seats. Brett approached them again. According to our system, there might be an error. These premium seats are usually reserved. Reserved for who? Marcus interrupted. Because my family has valid tickets that we purchased just like everyone else in this cabin. Brett's smile tightened. Sir, please lower your voice. We're simply trying to verify. You didn't ask anyone else to verify their tickets, Zoe pointed out. Despite being only 12, she had her mother's courage and her father's precision. Just us, Karen returned, holding a tablet. I've checked with the gate. There appears to be a seating error in the system. We'll need to sort this out before takeoff. The humiliation continued as other first-class passengers were welcomed warmly, offered pre-flight beverages, and treated with respect, all while the Johnson family remained under suspicious watch. What would you do if you were in the Johnsons' position? How far would you go to stand your ground? And what could possibly happen next that would turn this embarrassing situation into something much, much worse? Karen and Brett conferred in hushed tones near the galley before approaching the Johnson family again. By now, the first-class cabin was nearly full, with curious eyes watching the unfolding drama. The main cabin passengers had begun boarding, filing past the increasingly tense scene. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Brett began, his voice professionally detached. We believe we've identified the issue. There appears to have been a system error when these seats were booked. There was no error, Diana stated firmly. We booked these seats directly through your website. We have the confirmation emails. Karen stepped forward. Be that as it may, we need to address the current situation. As a compromise, we can offer to keep your children here in first class with appropriate supervision from our crew, while we find accommodations for you both in the main cabin. Marcus stared in disbelief. You want to separate us from our children? It's for everyone's comfort, Karen explained with false sweetness. The children can enjoy the first-class experience while you… Absolutely not, Diana interrupted. We will not be separated from our children. That's non-negotiable. Brett's expression hardened. Then I'm afraid all 4 of you will need to move to the main cabin. We can offer vouchers for a future flight as compensation. Marcus leaned forward. Let me be perfectly clear. We have legitimate tickets for these seats. We will not be moving. And we certainly won't be separated from our children. The elderly woman from seat 1B interjected. Just take the vouchers and move. You're ruining everyone's flight with this disruption. Other first-class passengers shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent, unwilling to get involved. A businessman buried his face deeper in his newspaper. A young couple exchanged whispers behind cupped hands. If you refuse to comply voluntarily, Karen said, her voice dropping to a threatening tone, I'll have no choice but to call security. Zoe, sensing the gravity of the situation, quietly took out her phone and began recording. Karen immediately noticed. Young lady, put that away immediately. Recording crew members is against airline policy. Actually, Diana replied, her lawyer, instincts fully engaged. Skyway's policy only prohibits recording safety demonstrations and crew members performing safety duties. There's no policy against recording interactions like this one. In fact, federal regulations protect our right to document civil rights violations. Karen's face flushed with anger. She reached for Zoe's phone. Give me that right now. Don't touch my daughter or her property, Marcus warned, his voice deadly calm. Brett stepped between them. Let's not escalate this further. Final warning, either accept reassignment to economy class, or we'll have you removed from the aircraft. On what grounds? Diana challenged. Creating a disturbance and refusing crew member instructions, Brett replied promptly. Eli, confused and frightened by the escalating tension, began to cry softly. Zoe put her arm around her brother, still holding her phone steady to record the interaction. My children are upset because you're threatening and harassing us, Marcus pointed out. We've done nothing wrong. Karen's smile turned cold. Security will determine that. Your disruptive behavior is making other passengers uncomfortable. Marcus looked around the cabin. Some passengers averted their eyes, while others watched with undisguised curiosity. Not one spoke up in their defense. This is happening because we're black, isn't it? Diana asked quietly. Karen gasped dramatically. How dare you? This has nothing to do with race. This is about following proper procedures. Procedures that apparently only apply to us, Marcus observed. Karen turned to Brett. Call security. Now. Brett nodded and picked up the cabin phone, speaking in low tones. Diana squeezed Marcus's hand under the armrest. Stay calm. We have rights, and we're not leaving these seats. Mom, Zoe whispered. Should I keep recording? Diana nodded. Subtly, don't stop. Minutes later, 3 airport security officers boarded the plane, walking directly to the Johnson family's row. Passengers turned in their seats to watch, many now openly recording the confrontation. Is there a problem here? The lead officer asked, addressing the flight attendants rather than the Johnson family. These passengers are refusing crew instructions and creating a disturbance, Brett explained. We need them removed from the aircraft. The security officer turned to Marcus. Sir, I'll need to see some ID in your boarding passes. May I ask why? Marcus responded. We have valid tickets for these seats. Just show me your ID, sir, the officer repeated, his hand resting meaningfully on his belt. Marcus slowly reached for his wallet. I'm getting my identification. I'm moving slowly and deliberately. As Marcus extended his wallet, the second security officer suddenly grabbed his wrist. He's reaching for something. In an instant, chaos erupted. The security officer drew his weapon, pointing it at Marcus. Hands where I can see them! Now! Zoe and Eli screamed in terror. Diana lunged protectively in front of her children. He was getting his ID! You asked for his ID! Passengers gasped, some scrambling from their seats while others frantically recorded the scene. The entire first-class cabin descended into pandemonium. On the ground! Now! The officer shouted at Marcus, who slowly raised his hands. I'm complying, Marcus said, clearly his voice steady despite the gun pointed at him. My wallet is in my right hand. You asked for my ID. The third officer roughly pulled Marcus from his seat, forcing him into the aisle. Against the wall! They slammed Marcus against the wall of the aircraft, wrenching his arms behind his back. The officer's knees pressed into his back as they handcuffed him. Dad, Eli sobbed, reaching for his father. Stay with your mother, Marcus called over his shoulder, wincing as the handcuffs tightened. Blood trickled from his lip where his face had hit the wall. Diana kept her children behind her, her phone now out and recording. Under what authority are you detaining him? He's done nothing wrong. We have valid tickets. Karen stepped forward. They refused to comply with crew instructions and became belligerent. That's a lie, Zoe shouted through tears, still recording with shaking hands. You're lying! One of the officers turned to Diana. Ma'am, you and your children need to gather your belongings and exit the aircraft now. Diana stood her ground. Not without my husband and not without an explanation. We have done nothing wrong. More security personnel arrived, crowding the narrow aisle. Passengers from economy class pushed forward to see the commotion, many recording on their phones. Please, Diana said, trying to reason with them. This is a mistake. Let me make a call. You can make all the calls you want once you're off this plane, the lead officer replied coldly. Diana, maintaining remarkable composure, dialed her brother's number. James, it's Diana. We're on flight 372 and security is trying to remove us. Marcus is in handcuffs. We need you now. As Marcus was being forcibly escorted toward the exit, blood now staining his collar, an older passenger in first class finally spoke up. "This isn't right. They weren't causing any trouble." "Sir, please stay out of this," Karen snapped. "This is an official security matter." The officers continued pushing Marcus down the jetway, his back still painfully bent. Diana hurried after, them with the children, both now sobbing uncontrollably. In the terminal, a small crowd gathered around the scene. Marcus remained handcuffed, flight security continuing to hold him against a wall near the gate area. "My brother-in-law is James Richardson," Diana told the security team, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "He's the CEO of this airline, and he's on his way here right now." One officer scoffed. "Yeah, and I'm friends with the president. Save your stories." Zoe, still recording despite her tears, captured everything. Her father's bloodied face, the officers' dismissive attitudes, her brother's frightened cries, and the growing crowd of onlookers, some sympathetic, others hostile. "You're hurting him," Eli shouted at the officers, his small face streaked with tears. "Stop hurting my dad." Karen emerged from the jetway, whispering to the security team. "The captain wants them banned from the flight. We can't have disruptive passengers compromising safety." The lead officer nodded. "They're not getting back on. We'll process him for interfering with a flight crew and resisting officers." "Resisting?" Diana exploded. "He complied with every instruction. You're the ones who escalated this situation." Another security officer approached. "Ma'am, if you continue this behavior, we'll need to detain you as well. Think about your children." The cruel irony of being told to think about her children after their family had been threatened with separation was not lost on Diana. She bit back her response, focusing instead on comforting Zoe and Eli while keeping her phone recording. Marcus met her eyes across the terminal. Despite his humiliation and physical pain, his gaze conveyed a clear message. Stay strong. Don't give them reasons to make this worse. 10 agonizing minutes passed, the officers refusing to loosen Marcus's handcuffs despite his complaints about circulation. Passengers from the flight walked past, some averting their eyes, others slowing to watch or record the scene. Then, through the crowd, a commanding voice called out, "What the hell is going on here?" James Richardson, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, pushed through the gathered onlookers. His face darkened with fury when he saw his brother-in-law, handcuffed and bleeding. "Release him immediately," James ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. A security officer stepped forward. "Sir, this is a security matter. Please step back." James pulled out his identification. "I'm James Richardson, CEO and co-owner of Skyway Airlines. That man you have in handcuffs is my brother-in-law and the co-owner of this entire airline. Release him now." The security officers exchanged nervous glances at James Richardson's declaration. The lead officer lowered his voice. "Sir, we'll need to verify your identity." "By all means," James replied icily, handing over his credentials. "While you're doing that, remove those handcuffs from my brother-in-law immediately." The officers hesitated, looking to Karen and Brett, who had followed them into the terminal. "These passengers were disrupting the boarding process," Karen insisted, stepping forward. "They refused to comply with crew instructions and became confrontational." James turned his razor-sharp gaze on her. "And you are?" "Karen Winters, senior flight attendant for Skyway." James nodded, committing the name to memory. "Ms. Winters, you're suspended effective immediately, pending investigation." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't do that. I was following protocol." "I'm the CEO. I write the protocols," James snapped before turning back to the security team. "Have you verified my identity yet, or shall I call the airport director? He's expecting me for a meeting in 30 minutes. The lead officer, now visibly uncomfortable, nodded to his colleagues. "Release him." As they reluctantly removed Marcus's handcuffs, James pulled out his phone. "I'm documenting every second of this, including the injuries sustained by my brother-in-law while in your custody." Marcus rubbed his wrists, wincing as circulation returned to his hands. Diana rushed to him with the children, Eli throwing his arms around his father's waist while Zoe continued recording. "Are you okay?" Diana whispered, gently touching the blood on his lip. "I'll live," Marcus replied quietly. "The kids?" Terrified but unharmed, James addressed the security team. "I want all of your names and badge numbers. Each of you will be included in the formal complaint I'll be filing within the hour." The officers shifted uncomfortably, but provided their information under James's unflinching stare. Karen and Brett stood awkwardly to the side, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning horror as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. A crowd of passengers and airport staff had gathered, many recording the scene on their phones. Have you ever witnessed someone abusing their position of power, only to have it spectacularly backfire when they realized who they were dealing with? Comment number 1 if you've ever seen justice served in a moment like this. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more stories where discrimination gets the response it deserves. "Now," James continued, his voice carrying across the terminal, "the Johnson family will be returning to their first-class seats, the seats they paid for and have every right to occupy. Anyone who has a problem with that can speak to me personally." He turned to Karen and Brett. "You two will not be serving on this flight. Wait for me in my office. Security will escort you." Airport staff who recognized James quickly moved to assist, providing first aid supplies for Marcus and offering water to the children. The tide had turned completely, with everyone now scrambling to accommodate the family they had minutes ago been prepared to remove forcibly. "I want the names of everyone involved in this incident," James instructed his assistant who had arrived on the scene. "Flight crew, gate agents, security personnel, everyone." The lead security officer attempted one last justification. "Sir, we were responding to reports of disruptive passengers. We had no way of knowing." "No way of knowing what?" James interrupted. "That they had valid tickets? That they weren't causing any actual disruption? Or no way of knowing they were black executives rather than black passengers you felt comfortable mistreating?" The officer fell silent. A different flight crew was hastily assembled, and profuse apologies offered as the Johnson family was escorted back to the plane. Passengers stared as they reboarded, whispers following them down the aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay," the new chief flight attendant announced. "We'll be departing shortly. Please welcome back the Johnson family, who are valued Skyway passengers and deserve our utmost respect." The first class passengers who had witnessed the initial confrontation now avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the views from their windows. The elderly woman who had complained earlier buried her face in a magazine. As they settled back into their seats, Eli whispered, "Dad, are we safe now?" Marcus hugged his son close. "Yes, buddy. Uncle James made sure of it." Diana checked her watch. "We're already 45 minutes delayed. Will we still make our dinner reservation at Disney?" "I'll have them hold it," James assured her. "It's the least I can do." As James prepared to disembark, letting the flight continue without him, he squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "I'm so sorry this happened. Heads will roll, I promise you." "Just make sure it leads to real change," Marcus replied quietly. "Not just scapegoating a few employees when the problem is systemic." James nodded gravely. "You have my word." As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, the Johnson family exhaled collectively. The worst seemed behind them. Diana took Marcus's hand, Zoe managed a small smile, and Eli's excitement about Disney gradually returned. They had no idea their ordeal was only beginning. What would happen once they were airborne, away from the protective presence of James? Would the temporary victory turn into something else entirely? And how far would those who had been humiliated go to retaliate? The aircraft climbed to cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the replacement flight crew began their service. The new chief flight attendant, a woman named Melissa, approached the Johnson family with exaggerated courtesy. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, on behalf of Skyway Airlines, I want to extend our deepest apologies for the inexcusable treatment you received. Today's beverages and meals are complimentary, and we've arranged special treats for your children." "Thank you," Marcus replied, though he noticed how other passengers in first class were watching the interaction with undisguised interest. Melissa lowered her voice. I want you to know that not all Skyway employees share the attitudes you encountered earlier. Many of us are mortified by what happened. Diana nodded. We appreciate that. We've always been proud of the inclusive culture at Skyway. As Melissa moved away, Diana turned to Marcus. Well, that was something. Too little, too late, he murmured. But at least the kids can enjoy the rest of the flight. Their momentary relief was short-lived. 20 minutes into the flight, Marcus discovered his overhead luggage had been disturbed. His carefully packed clothes were disheveled, and his laptop case, containing sensitive engineering designs, appeared to have been searched. Someone went through my bag, he whispered to Diana. Before she could respond, Eli pointed at his entertainment screen. Dad, mine's not working. Everyone else's is on, but mine says, service unavailable. Zoe checked hers. Mine too. Diana pressed her call button. A different flight attendant wearing a forced smile responded. Yes? Our children's entertainment systems aren't working, Diana explained. We'll reset them, the attendant replied without checking. Technical difficulties happen sometimes. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Only on these two specific screens? The attendant's smile tightened. I'll see what I can do. She walked away but never returned to address the issue. When Melissa came by with the drink cart, Marcus mentioned it again. I'm so sorry, she said, looking genuinely concerned. Let me check with our technician. While she was gone, Diana opened her laptop to review files for an upcoming civil rights case. Her expression darkened. Marcus, my case files, the Wilson discrimination suit documents, they're gone. What? Could you have saved them somewhere else? No, they were right here, Diana insisted, panic rising in her voice. The folder is empty. Someone deleted them. The implications were chilling. These weren't just any files, they were evidence for a high-profile racial discrimination lawsuit against a major corporation. A case that had already received threatening letters from anonymous sources. Melissa returned with snacks for the children. I'm sorry, but our technician says those systems will need ground maintenance. Perhaps the children can watch something on your devices. That would be fine, except someone appears to have tampered with our electronics, Diana replied tersely. Melissa's expression flickered with concern. I don't understand. How could that happen? Before Diana could elaborate, the cabin intercom crackled to life, broadcasting what should have been a private conversation between crew members. Need to be careful around them. Richardson's watching this flight personally. I know, but did you see what happened to Karen? 20 years of service and now she's probably fired because of them. Just keep your distance and document everything. If they complain about anything else. The intercom abruptly cut off as someone realized it was broadcasting. Passengers throughout the cabin shifted uncomfortably, many turning to stare at the Johnson family. Zoe, who had been quiet since reboarding, whispered, Mom, Dad, everyone's looking at us. Just ignore them, sweetheart, Marcus advised, though. His jaw was tight with tension. When meal service began, another disturbing pattern emerged. While other first-class passengers received attentive service, the Johnson children were repeatedly forgotten or served last. When Eli asked for apple juice, the attendant claimed they were all out, only to serve it to another child minutes later. This is ridiculous, Diana muttered. Marcus touched her hand. We're documenting everything. James will handle it when we land. Midway through the flight, Marcus went to use the first-class lavatory. As he washed his hands, he overheard flight attendants talking just outside the door. Probably going to sue the airline. My cousin works in HR and says they're preparing for a massive lawsuit. Well, what did Karen expect? You can't just confront people like that, especially when they're, Still, it's not fair. We're walking on eggshells while they sit there acting like they own the place. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Little did they know. When he returned to his seat, Diana was on the phone. The aircraft had Wi-Fi, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Yes, James, it's continuing even now. Someone deleted critical case files from my laptop. No, it couldn't have been an accident. Yes, we're documenting everything. The final hour of the flight passed in tense silence. What should have been the exciting beginning of a family vacation had transformed into an exhausting ordeal. Eli had fallen asleep, emotionally drained. Zoe sat stiffly, her young face showing a weariness no child should experience. As the plane began its descent into Orlando, Diana squeezed Marcus's hand. "We made it." Marcus nodded but remained cautious. "Let's just get off this plane and to the hotel. Tomorrow will be better." But as they taxied to the gate, an announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that all passengers remain seated upon arrival. Some passengers will be deplaning first to make connections." Diana and Marcus exchanged glances. There were no connections from Orlando to make. It was a destination airport for most travelers. This was something else. When the seatbelt sign turned off, a new group of Skyway representatives boarded, headed directly for the Johnson family. A man in a crisp suit approached with an apologetic smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I'm Anthony Weber, Skyway's Director of Customer Experience. On behalf of the airline, I'd like to personally escort you and your children from the aircraft." It seemed like another victory, special treatment to make amends. But Marcus had learned to be skeptical. "That's very kind," he replied carefully. "Is there a particular reason?" Weber's smile remained fixed. "Just a courtesy, sir. And there are some people waiting to speak with you." "What people?" Diana asked sharply. Weber hesitated. "Airport police have some questions about an incident reported during the flight." The momentary relief vanished instantly. They weren't being escorted as honored guests. They were being handled as potential criminals. "Again. What incident?" Marcus demanded. "I don't have all the details," Weber admitted, "but it would be best to address this discreetly for everyone's sake." As they gathered their belongings, other passengers watching with renewed interest, Diana whispered to Marcus, "Call James again, now." The ordeal was far from over. The Johnson family was escorted through the jetway, not into the terminal as expected, but into a small conference room adjacent to the gate area. Two uniformed officers from the Orlando Airport Police waited inside, along with a Skyway customer service representative clutching a tablet. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," one officer began, "we need to ask you some questions about an incident reported during your flight from Atlanta." Marcus kept his children close. "What incident?" "We've been the victims of discrimination since we arrived at the airport in Atlanta." The officer consulted his notes. "We have a report that you made threatening statements to crew members and exhibited aggressive behavior that made other passengers uncomfortable." Diana's legal instincts flared. "That's absolutely false. We were targeted, harassed, and physically assaulted in Atlanta. My husband was handcuffed and bloodied by security officers." "We have video evidence of everything." The second officer nodded. "We're aware of the Atlanta incident. This is a separate report filed during the flight." "By whom?" Marcus demanded. "That information is confidential," the officer replied. "But the complaint was serious enough to warrant investigation." Meanwhile, other passengers from their flight streamed past the glass walls of the conference room, some slowing to stare. Eli clung to Marcus's leg, exhausted and frightened by the continued ordeal. "My children are tired and traumatized," Diana stated firmly. "We've been through enough today. Either charge us with something specific or let us go." The Skyway representative stepped forward. "Mrs. Johnson, we're just following protocol. The safety of all our passengers." "Don't talk to me about passenger safety," Diana interrupted. "Where was this concern when security had a gun pointed at my husband in front of our children? Where was passenger safety when your staff tried to separate us from our kids?" Outside the conference room, a commotion caught their attention. Camera flashes illuminated the terminal, and several people with microphones pushed toward the door. "Great," Marcus muttered. "The media's here." The Skyway representative paled. "We didn't alert any press. This was supposed to be handled discreetly." Diana's phone buzzed with an incoming call from James. She answered immediately, putting it on speaker. "James, we're being detained again. In Orlando. Airport police and more spurious claims." "I'm already on it," James replied, his voice crackling through the speaker. Our legal team is sending representatives to you now, and I've spoken with the Orlando Airport director. I've made it clear that Skyway will hold the airport authority personally liable for any further harassment. The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Additionally, James continued, I've launched a full internal investigation. We've identified who filed the mid-flight complaint against you. Karen Winters made a call to a friend on the Orlando ground staff while you were in the air. We have the phone records. The Skyway representative looked increasingly distressed. Mr. Richardson, I assure you I had no knowledge. Your name is on my list too, James interrupted coldly. Now put the airport police commander on the phone. The lead officer reluctantly took the phone, listening for several minutes with a progressively more concerned expression. Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, immediately. He handed the phone back to Diana. You're free to go. We apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? Marcus echoed incredulously. Is that what you call racial profiling, physical assault, and harassment in front of our children? The officer had the decency to look ashamed. Sir, we were responding to a complaint that now appears to have been filed maliciously. We will be investigating that matter separately. As they prepared to leave, the door burst open, and several reporters called out questions simultaneously. Mr. Johnson, can you comment on the racial incident aboard Skyway Airlines today? Mrs. Johnson, is it true you're planning to sue the airline your brother owns? Did you know the What Are Flying While Black is trending nationwide with your video? Zoe's video had gone viral. What had begun as a private family vacation had exploded into a public relations nightmare for Skyway Airlines and a national conversation about racial profiling in air travel. James had arranged for private security to meet them, forming a protective barrier as they navigated through the terminal. Flashes from cameras followed them, questions shouted from all directions. Eli buried his face against Marcus's chest, overwhelmed by the chaos. Our car is waiting outside, their security escort informed them. Mr. Richardson has arranged direct transport to your hotel. As they approached the exit, a final surprise awaited. A small group of local police officers. Mr. Johnson, one called, we need a statement from you regarding threatening behavior aboard your flight. Diana stepped forward. My husband has been accused of nothing credible. We're leaving now. Any further questions can go through our attorneys. The officer blocked their path. I'm afraid this is a different matter. We received multiple reports about aggressive behavior and threats made to airline staff. Standard procedure requires us to investigate. Marcus stared in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. Behind them, Diana spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Karen Winters watching from a distance, a satisfied smirk playing at her lips. Even after being suspended, she had found a way to continue their torment. Officer, Diana said coldly, I am an attorney specializing in civil rights law. You are currently participating in a coordinated campaign of harassment against my family based on racially motivated false reports. I suggest you think very carefully about your next action. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before James's influence again cleared their path. As they finally reached their vehicle, Marcus received a text from a colleague at Skyway's engineering department. Check your inbox. Someone's been accessing your secure server files. Looks like they were searching for something specific. The conspiracy was larger and more coordinated than a single biased flight attendant. Someone with significant resources and access was targeting them. But why? The following morning, while the children slept in their hotel suite, exhausted from the previous day's trauma, Marcus and Diana joined James for an emergency meeting in a secured conference room. Skyway's chief legal counsel, head of security, and several board members joined remotely via encrypted video call. We've uncovered something disturbing, James began, sliding a folder across the table. Karen Winters isn't just any flight attendant. Her father is William Winters. Diana's eyes widened. The William Winters, CEO of Transglobal Airways? James nodded grimly. Our biggest competitor and the man who's been trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Skyway for the past 18 months. Marcus examined the documents in the folder. So yesterday wasn't random discrimination. It was targeted. It appears so, the head of security confirmed. We've found evidence of communication between Karen Winters and Transglobal executives. Dating back 6 months, she was deliberately placed on your flight yesterday. Diana leaned forward. You're saying they engineered this whole incident? The discrimination, the public humiliation, all of it? With a specific goal, James added, to create a massive PR disaster for Skyway, tank our stock price, and force a crisis that would make a takeover more viable. Have you ever discovered that what seemed like random misfortune was actually a calculated attack? Comment number 1 if you've ever realized someone was deliberately trying to undermine you. Hit like and subscribe if you want to see how the Johnsons fight back against this corporate conspiracy. The chief legal counsel shared her screen, showing a graph of Skyway's stock price, which had plummeted 30% since the videos went viral. A flying while black continues to trend, and we've already received cancellations worth millions. Transglobal has conveniently announced expanded routes that directly compete with our most profitable corridors. But there's more, James continued darkly. I've called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Several members are demanding my resignation over the incident, claiming I've mishandled the response and damaged the company's reputation. Let me guess, Marcus said. Those board members have connections to William Winters. The head of security nodded. 3 of them have recently acquired significant positions in Transglobal subsidiaries, very quietly, through shell companies. We've only just traced. Diana's attorney mind was already calculating angles. So the plan was to create a racial incident involving us, knowing it would go viral because of our connection to the airline. Then use the PR disaster to force James out and drive the stock price down enough to make a takeover feasible. Precisely, James confirmed. And they nearly succeeded. The only miscalculation was being so obvious that I arrived on the scene, in Atlanta, before they could escalate things further. Marcus's phone buzzed with an alert. He checked it and frowned. It gets worse. My team just found evidence that someone attempted to access our new fuel efficiency system designs, the innovation that gives us a 20% cost advantage over Transglobal. Diana's expression hardened. They weren't just trying to embarrass us. They were after our intellectual property too. The meeting was interrupted by a hotel staff member delivering an urgent message. The Skyway board meeting had been moved up, and several members were already calling for immediate leadership. Changes. I need to go, James said, standing. You two should stay with the children. After yesterday, they need stability. No, Marcus replied firmly. This affects all of us. We'll be there. Diana nodded in agreement. We'll arrange childcare through the hotel. This is too important. 3 hours later, they sat in Skyway's Orlando corporate office as board member Eleanor Pritchard, a recent appointee, addressed the emergency session. The events yesterday represent a catastrophic failure of leadership, she declared, glancing meaningfully at James. Our stock has collapsed. Customers are canceling reservations, and the public relations damage may be irreparable. We need decisive action to stabilize the company. Board member Richard Vance nodded in agreement. I move that we temporarily suspend James Richardson as CEO while we navigate this crisis. Furthermore, we should consider Transglobal's standing. Offered to acquire a controlling interest in Skyway. Marcus and Diana exchanged knowing glances. The plan was unfolding exactly as predicted. James remained calm. Before we vote on that motion, I believe Marcus and Diana Johnson have relevant information to share. Marcus connected his laptop to the presentation system. What you're about to see is evidence of corporate espionage and market manipulation, orchestrated by William Winters and Transglobal Airways, with the cooperation of several people in this room. Gasps and murmurs filled the conference room as Marcus displayed communications between board members, Pritchard, Vance, and another director with Transglobal executives. The messages explicitly discussed creating a racial incident involving the Johnson family to damage Skyway's reputation. This isn't just unethical, Diana added, her attorney's voice crisp and authoritative. It's illegal on multiple counts: securities fraud, corporate espionage, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. The Department of Justice will be very interested in this evidence. Eleanor Pritchard's face drained of color. These documents are fabricated. This is slander." Diana smiled coldly. "Actually, they come directly from TransGlobal's servers. You should be more careful about your husband's cybersecurity practices, Eleanor. His personal email account was remarkably easy to access once we knew where to look." The room erupted into chaos as accusations flew. James calmly called for order. "There will be a full investigation, and those responsible will face consequences. But right now, we need to address the immediate crisis. TransGlobal orchestrated yesterday's events to damage our company. They wanted it to appear that Skyway Airlines condones racial discrimination. We need to demonstrate decisively that we don't." At that moment, the conference room door opened, and Karen Winters was escorted in by security. Her confident smirk vanished when she saw Marcus and Diana. "Ms. Winters," James said coldly, "you've been called to this meeting to explain your actions yesterday and your long-standing cooperation with your father's company in efforts to damage Skyway Airlines." Karen sputtered indignantly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was simply following protocol for passengers who—" "Save it," Marcus interrupted, advancing the presentation to display Karen's phone records, bank statements showing regular payments from a TransGlobal subsidiary, and emails to her father, detailing her position at Skyway. Karen's composure cracked. "My father will destroy all of you for this. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "We do now," Diana replied calmly, "and we're prepared to deal with him appropriately." As Karen was escorted out, the remaining loyal board members voted unanimously to back James's leadership and pursue legal action against TransGlobal and the compromised directors. But outside the boardroom, another crisis was unfolding. Social media had exploded with edited clips of the incident, manipulating the footage to portray Marcus as aggressive and Diana as the stereotypical angry black woman. Supporters of Karen, Winters had organized a counter-narrative, claiming she was being scapegoated for enforcing standard policies. The Johnson family's private nightmare had become a public battleground, with their reputation, safety, and Skyway Airlines hanging in the balance. The conspiracy had deeper roots than they'd imagined, and William Winters was just getting started with his retaliation. What vicious tactics would TransGlobal employ next? How would the Johnson family protect themselves from an enemy willing to use racial prejudice as a corporate weapon? And could they ever give their children back the sense of security that had been so violently stripped away? By the next morning, the Johnson family's ordeal had become national news. Every major network ran segments featuring the viral video of Marcus being handcuffed, but many outlets showed only selective portions that omitted the flight attendants' provocations. Headlines ranged from sympathetic, black family owners of Airline racially profiled on their own plane, to inflammatory, privileged executives cause scene over seating arrangement. "Turn it off," Diana told Zoe, who was scrolling through social media on her tablet at the hotel breakfast table. "You don't need to see what they're saying." But it was too late. Zoe's eyes welled with tears. "Mom, they're saying terrible things about Dad. They're calling him aggressive and dangerous. They're saying you used your connection to Uncle James to get special treatment." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. "People form opinions without knowing all the facts. What matters is the truth, and we know what happened." Their phones buzzed simultaneously, an alert from their security team. The hotel's location had been leaked online, and several journalists and protesters were gathering in the lobby. "So much for Disney today," Diana sighed, glancing at Eli, who was pushing his Mickey-shaped pancakes around his plate. "Is it because we're black?" Eli asked quietly, the innocence of the question breaking their hearts. Before either parent could answer, Marcus's phone rang. It was James. "Don't turn on the TV," James warned. Karen Winters just gave an exclusive interview to National Morning claiming she was victimized. She's crying on camera about how her 20-year career was destroyed for simply doing her job and how she's received death threats. "That's ridiculous," Marcus growled. "She orchestrated this entire situation." "It gets worse," James continued. "TransGlobal's PR machine is in full swing. William Winters has announced a new diversity initiative at his airline, positioning himself as a champion against discrimination. while implying Skyway has systemic issues. Diana checked her own phone and gasped. Skyway's stock had dropped another 15% in pre-market trading. "We're arranging secure transportation for you," James added. "The corporate apartment in the secured building downtown is being prepared. It's not safe at the hotel anymore." As they packed hurriedly, their security detail reported that a crowd had gathered outside their hotel room. Staff had to escort them through service corridors to avoid the cameras and hostile faces. In the car, Zoe showed her parents what was happening online. Edited videos made it appear that Marcus had resisted the officers, while Diana's fierce defense of her family had been cut to portray her as irrationally angry. Thousands of comments called for boycotts of Skyway, while others contained explicit racial slurs and threats. "Dad, my friends from school are seeing this," Zoe said, her voice trembling. "Caitlin texted asking if you really got arrested for threatening people on a plane." Marcus closed his eyes, the pain of his daughter's distress, worse than any physical injury from the ordeal. When they reached the corporate apartment, they found it had already been prepared with additional security. Bulletproof glass, secured entry points, and guards stationed discreetly throughout the building. "Is this really necessary?" Diana asked the head of their security team. "I'm afraid so, Mrs. Johnson. The threats we're monitoring are credible enough to warrant these precautions." That afternoon, they received word that employees at Skyway's headquarters had been told to remain silent about the incident or risk termination. Several who had spoken out in support of the Johnson family on social media had already received warning letters. "They're isolating us," Diana realized, "making it too costly for anyone to stand with us." Their Disney vacation was officially canceled. The park had received security concerns about the Johnson family's visit, and while they hadn't revoked access, the implied scrutiny made it impossible to give the children any semblance of a normal experience. That evening, as Eli finally fell asleep, emotionally exhausted from the continuing ordeal, Diana found Zoe crying silently in her room. "Honey, what happened?" Diana asked, sitting beside her on the bed. "Jasmine and Taylor uninvited me from the sleepover next weekend," Zoe sobbed. "Their parents said I'm too controversial right now, and someone made a fake profile of me online saying horrible things about white people. Everyone at school thinks it's really me." The campaign against them had extended to targeting their children. For Diana and Marcus, this crossed a line that made their resolve crystallize into something harder and more determined. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Marcus and Diana sat in the living room of their secured apartment, the weight of the past 2 days evident in their exhausted faces. "We could just walk away," Marcus said quietly. "Sell our stake in Skyway, move somewhere quiet, start over. The children shouldn't have to bear this burden." Diana took his hands in hers. "Is that really what you want to do? Let them win?" Marcus was silent for a long moment before finally shaking his head. "No, but I want our kids safe." "Then we fight," Diana said, her voice finding new strength. "Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who's ever been discriminated against and didn't have the resources we have." Marcus nodded, determination replacing weariness in his eyes. William Winters picked the wrong family to target. Dawn broke on day 3 of the crisis, and the Johnson family awoke with a new sense of purpose. While the children remained under protection at the apartment, Marcus and Diana convened a war room at Skyway's Orlando office with James and a carefully selected team of allies. "First," Diana announced, "we activate my network." As a civil rights attorney, she had connections throughout the legal world. Within hours, 12 prominent civil rights attorneys had offered their services pro bono, recognizing the case's potential to set precedents about discrimination in the airline industry. Meanwhile, Marcus gathered his most trusted engineers. Karen Winters claimed the security cameras on the jet bridge and in the terminal mysteriously malfunctioned during our incident. "I don't believe in that kind of coincidence." His team set to work using specialized software to recover the deleted security footage. By mid-afternoon, they had reconstructed complete video coverage of the incident, showing definitively that the Johnson family had been cooperative while Karen Winters And the security officers had escalated the situation unnecessarily. "This changes everything," James said, reviewing the footage. "We released this to counter their edited versions." But their progress was immediately challenged. A board member loyal to James received an anonymous tip that several major shareholders were secretly selling their stakes while publicly declaring confidence in the company, a classic preparation for a market crash they knew was coming. "They're planning to tank our stock completely," the board member warned. "Then TransGlobal will swoop in with a lowball offer that frightened shareholders might accept." Diana deployed her legal team to investigate, uncovering evidence of insider trading and market manipulation. "We're building a case for the SEC," she informed James. "This goes beyond discrimination. It's securities fraud." The next breakthrough came unexpectedly from Zoe. While scrolling through social media coverage of the incident, she noticed something. Her original, complete video recording contradicted the manipulated versions circulating online. "Mom, Dad," she called excitedly. "My complete video is still in my cloud account. I never shared the whole thing, just sent parts to Uncle James." The unedited footage showed Karen Winter's aggressive stance, her attempt to separate the family, and the security officers drawing weapons without provocation. Most importantly, it captured Karen's whispered conversation with a colleague. "My father will be pleased. This is exactly what we needed." Within hours, Zoe's complete video was strategically released through trusted media allies, accompanied by the recovered security footage. The public narrative began to shift, but TransGlobal and their allies fought back viciously. The Johnson family awakened the next morning to discover their credit cards frozen, hotel reservations for their extended family canceled across the country, and even Marcus's professional certifications flagged for review by regulatory bodies with ties to William Winters. "They're trying to erase us," Marcus realized, "make us so toxic that no one will work with us." The counterattack came from an unexpected quarter. Skyway employees, outraged by the truth revealed in the unedited videos, organized a walkout in May, support of the Johnson family. Thousands of workers across the country refused to staff flights until the company took a stronger stand against the discrimination their owners had faced. "The workers are with you," the union representative told James. "This isn't just about the Johnson family anymore. It's about whether corporations can use racial discrimination as a weapon for profit." The employee walkout created an operational crisis for Skyway, with hundreds of flights canceled. But it also demonstrated unmistakably where staff loyalties lay, and generated enormous public support as workers shared their own experiences of witnessing discrimination against passengers. Anonymous Skyway employees began leaking internal documents showing a pattern of discriminatory treatment toward minority passengers, particularly in first class. What had happened to the Johnson family, they revealed, was extreme, but not isolated. "This is actually helpful," Diana told Marcus as they reviewed the leaked documents. "It shows the problem is systemic, not just one bad employee. We can use this to push for industry-wide reforms." Marcus, meanwhile, channeled his engineering expertise into developing a crisis management protocol that would prevent similar incidents in the future. His system included implicit bias training, de-escalation techniques, and accountability measures that would become an industry standard. "We turn this crisis into an opportunity," he explained to James. "Position Skyway as the leader in addressing discrimination that exists throughout the industry." By the end of the week, their multi-pronged counterattack had begun to turn the tide. The SEC announced an investigation into TransGlobal based on the evidence Diana's team had provided. The unedited videos had gone viral, generating public sympathy for the Johnson family and outrage against Karen Winters and William Winters. Most significantly, 3 major civil rights organizations announced a joint campaign supporting the Johnson family and calling for industry-wide reforms in how airlines treat passengers of color. But William Winters was far from defeated. That evening, as the Johnson family cautiously celebrated their progress, they received an encrypted message from a whistleblower inside TransGlobal. "Winters planning something big tomorrow. Watch your backs." The battle was far from over. An emergency shareholder meeting was called for Skyway Airlines, scheduled for 9 a.m. at corporate headquarters. With the company's stock in freefall and operational chaos from the employee walkout, investors demanded answers and action. The Johnson family arrived under heavy security, the children remaining at the secured apartment with trusted guards. The mood in the boardroom was tense as shareholders filled the seats, many having flown in on short notice for this crucial meeting. James opened the session grimly. "We face unprecedented challenges. Our stock has dropped 43% in 3 days. Our operations are significantly disrupted due to employee action, and we have evidence of a coordinated attack against this company orchestrated by our chief competitor." Before he could continue, the boardroom doors swung open. William Winters strode in, flanked by lawyers and several Skyway board members who had been conspicuously silent during the crisis. "I apologize for my late arrival," Winters announced, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, expensive suit immaculate. At 65, he projected the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "But I believe my presence is relevant to today's discussions." James tensed. "This is a private shareholder meeting, William. You have no standing here." Winters smiled thinly. "Actually, as of this morning, Transglobal Airways holds 8% of Skyway's outstanding shares, purchased through various subsidiaries. Additionally, I represent proxy votes for another 23% of shareholders who have lost confidence in current leadership." The room erupted in murmurs. If Winters controlled 31% of votes, combined with the board members already aligned with him, he could effectively take control of the company. "Furthermore," Winters continued, "I've prepared a generous offer to acquire Skyway at $20 per share, well above its current trading price of $12. This represents a lifeline for shareholders who might otherwise face total loss of their investments." Diana studied the faces around the room. Many shareholders looked tempted, frightened by the rapid devaluation of their holdings. "Before anyone considers that offer," she said, standing, "you should know that the SEC has opened an investigation into market manipulation involving Transglobal Airways. Accepting this offer could implicate you in an ongoing securities fraud case." Winters chuckled. "Desperate accusations from a family trying to preserve their position. Where is your evidence of this alleged manipulation?" Marcus connected his laptop to the presentation system. "Right here." The screen displayed a comprehensive timeline, Karen Winters' placement on their flight, coordinated with short positions taken by Transglobal subsidiaries against Skyway stock, communications between compromised board members and Transglobal executives, the strategic release of edited videos simultaneous with massive stock sales. "This wasn't just discrimination," Marcus explained calmly. "It was economic sabotage designed to manufacture a crisis and drive our stock price down for your benefit." A senior shareholder leaned forward. "If this is true, it's criminal." "Preposterous," Winters scoffed. "You're asking shareholders to believe a complex conspiracy theory rather than the simpler truth. Your airline has a discrimination problem, and the market is responding accordingly." James nodded to Diana, who played their trump card. "Karen Winters, please join us." The former flight attendant entered from a side door, looking considerably less confident than during her television appearance. She took a seat at the witness table, avoiding eye contact with her father. "Ms. Winters," Diana began, "please explain to the shareholders your relationship with Transglobal Airways and your father's instructions regarding the Johnson family." Karen glanced nervously at William Winters, whose face had hardened to stone. I was instructed to create a situation that would embarrass the Johnson family and damage Skyway's reputation." Gasps filled the boardroom. William Winters' lawyer immediately intervened. "My client denies any such instruction and suggests Ms. Winters is being coerced into this testimony." "I'm not being coerced," Karen continued, finding her voice. "For 6 months, I've been reporting to Transglobal executives about Skyway operations. When I learned the Johnson family would be on my flight, I received specific instructions to create an incident that would go viral." "And who gave you those instructions?" Diana pressed. Karen met her father's gaze directly for the first time. "My father, William Winters. He said it was a necessary business tactic to put these people in their place and facilitate the Transglobal takeover of Skyway." The room erupted. William Winters surged to his feet, face contorted with rage. "You, ungrateful." "Mr. Winters," James interrupted sharply, "I suggest you control yourself. Federal agents are monitoring this meeting, and your daughter has already provided them with a sworn statement." As if on cue, 2 FBI agents entered the boardroom, accompanied by SEC officials. "William Winters," one announced, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, conspiracy, and violations of federal civil rights statutes." The corporate titan who had seemed so powerful moments before now appeared diminished as agents read him his rights. The board members, who had aligned with him, tried to distance themselves, but James was unforgiving. "Those of you who participated in this conspiracy have a choice," he informed them. "Resign immediately and cooperate with authorities, or face charges alongside Mr. Winters." 3 board members stood and silently placed their resignations on the table before leaving. The remaining shareholders, witnessing this dramatic turn of events, unanimously rejected TransGlobal's acquisition offer and passed a resolution supporting James's continued leadership. As William Winters was escorted out in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Marcus and Diana. "This isn't over," he promised quietly. "You have no idea what you've started." Despite the victory in the boardroom, the Johnson family knew that the public battle for their reputation and the broader fight against discrimination were far from resolved. The arrest of William Winters would generate new headlines, but the damage to their children's sense of security and the painful awareness of how quickly they could be dehumanized despite their success remained. "We won the battle," Diana murmured to Marcus as they left the boardroom. "But the war continues." Marcus nodded, watching the media frenzy already forming outside. "And our real work is just beginning." 1 year later, the Johnson family stood on the observation deck of Skyway's newly inaugurated headquarters. The gleaming building featured a diversity training center, civil rights legal clinic, and engineering innovation lab, all named for different pioneers who had fought discrimination in transportation. "Hard to believe how much has changed in a year," Diana remarked, watching Zoe and Eli press their faces against the glass, pointing excitedly at planes taking off and landing. Marcus nodded, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "For better and worse." The aftermath of what the media now called the Skyway incident had transformed both the airline industry and the Johnson family. William Winters had been convicted on multiple federal charges, now serving a 15-year sentence. Karen Winters had received probation in exchange for her testimony, and now worked as a baggage handler at a regional airport, the only aviation job she could find after being blacklisted by major carriers. Skyway Airlines had emerged stronger than before. Under James's continued leadership and with Marcus heading a new engineering division focused on passenger comfort and safety, the company had implemented industry-leading anti-discrimination policies that were being adopted by competitors. Diana had established Skyway's legal department specializing in civil rights compliance, offering free representation to passengers who experienced discrimination on any airline. Her team had already handled over 200 cases, creating a body of legal precedent that was changing how the entire industry operated. "Parents, come look," Eli called excitedly. "Our plane is at the gate." The children had been counting down to today for weeks, their rescheduled Disney World vacation, delayed but not forgotten. This time, they would fly on Skyway's newest aircraft, featuring innovations Marcus had developed specifically in response to their ordeal. "I still get nervous when I think about flying," Zoe admitted quietly when her parents joined them at the window. "That's understandable, sweetheart," Marcus assured her. "What happened was traumatic. But remember what we always say? We turn pain into purpose," Zoe recited, the family mantra they had adopted during the difficult months of legal battles, media scrutiny, and recovery. The children had found their own ways to process the experience. Zoe had started a popular video series educating young people about their rights when traveling. Eli had designed a fairness rating system for transportation companies that had been featured in a national science fair. "We should head to security," Diana suggested, checking her watch. "Even with pre-check, I like to allow extra time." As they made their way through the terminal, the differences from a year ago were striking. Skyway staff now wore body cameras to record all passenger interactions. Security checkpoints featured civilian observers from community organizations. Signs in multiple languages informed travelers of their rights and outlined clear complaint procedures. They passed through security without incident, though Marcus noted how the experience still triggered a physical tension in his body, an unconscious trauma response that might never fully disappear. At their gate, they were greeted by the new flight crew, a deliberately diverse team led by Captain Michelle Lau, who had been among the first employees to support the Johnson family during the crisis. "Welcome aboard, Johnson family," Captain Lau said warmly. "We've been looking forward to having you fly with us." As they settled into their first-class seats, Eli whispered, "Dad, look over there." Near the customer service desk stood a woman, in a budget airline uniform, watching the boarding process. It took Marcus a moment to recognize Karen Winters, her appearance significantly changed by the year's stress. She quickly averted her gaze when she realized he had noticed her. "Should we say something to her?" Zoe asked. Diana shook her head. She suffered the consequences of her actions. That's enough. The final passengers boarded, and Captain Lau made an announcement that had become standard on all Skyway flights. "At Skyway Airlines, we believe every passenger deserves respect, dignity, and equal treatment. If you experience or witness anything contrary to these values during your journey, please alert any crew member immediately." As the plane taxied toward the runway, Marcus reflected on the transformation their ordeal had sparked. The airline industry was changing. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. People who had previously remained silent about discrimination now had mechanisms to report it and expectation of response. He thought about William Winters, whose empire had collapsed under the weight of the criminal charges. The man had sacrificed everything, his freedom, his reputation, his legacy, for profit and prejudice. "What are you thinking about?" Diana asked softly. "How a terrible moment became a turning point," Marcus replied. "Not just for us, but for an entire industry." The aircraft lifted smoothly into the blue Orlando sky. Below them, the Skyway headquarters gleamed in the sunlight, its new logo incorporating a subtle equal sign, James's idea, a quiet but unmistakable statement of the company's values. Zoe and Eli had their faces pressed to the windows again, their excitement about Disney World finally untainted by fear or trauma. They had learned harsh truths about the world too early, but they had also witnessed the power of standing firm against injustice. "You know," Diana said, taking Marcus's hand, "when we first became part owners of Skyway, I never imagined we'd end up changing the whole industry." Marcus smiled. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the most important changes. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached 10,000 feet. You're now free to move about the cabin. Free." The word resonated with new meaning. Not just the physical freedom of movement, but something deeper, the ongoing work of ensuring that freedom was equally available to everyone, regardless of race, regardless of appearance, regardless of assumptions. There would be other battles, other challenges. But today, as they soared toward their long-delayed family vacation, the Johnsons had transformed a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. Not just for themselves, but for everyone who would board a flight after them. This story powerfully illustrates how discrimination can occur regardless of one's social status or accomplishments. The Johnson family, despite owning the airline, experienced racial profiling that reflects the reality many face daily. It demonstrates how prejudice operates on both individual and systemic levels, sometimes weaponized for personal or corporate gain. The narrative also highlights the importance of documentation and evidence. Zoe's video recording became crucial, evidence that countered manipulated narratives, showing why transparency matters in fighting discrimination. Furthermore, we see how allies can make a significant difference, from the Skyway employees who staged a walkout to the civil rights attorneys who offered support. Collective action proved essential in confronting injustice. Perhaps most importantly, the story emphasizes turning pain into purpose. Rather than simply seeking personal vindication, The Johnsons channeled their traumatic experience into meaningful industry-wide reforms that would protect others from similar treatment. The transformation of Skyway Airlines, with new training programs, accountability measures, and diversity initiatives, illustrates how institutions can evolve when confronted with their failings. It shows that change, while difficult, is possible when there's commitment to addressing root causes rather than mere symptoms. Finally, this story reminds us that justice often requires persistence in the face of powerful opposition. The Johnsons faced intimidation, public scrutiny, and corporate manipulation, yet remained steadfast in their pursuit of accountability. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? How did you respond, and what impact did it have on you? Share your story in the comments below. If you believe everyone deserves equal treatment and dignity regardless of their appearance, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that highlight both the challenges we face and the changes we can create together. Thank you for joining us on this journey of awareness and transformation. Remember, when we speak up against injustice, we help create a better world for everyone.